So what I thought I would do is just try to make a few salient points and leave it open for questions afterwards. And Kutsia, when you talk about the UMA, those who are possibly from Ireland or from Texas have that same sense of belonging with other Texans around the world, for those of you that grew up here. So when I was I looked through at foreign policy through a security lens. And what I think is one of our biggest challenges and has been one of our greatest weaknesses is that we have allowed our voice and our image to be hijacked by others overseas. Those that would like to present a false image of us and then use that to garner support, to weaken us, or even to destroy us. And our foreign policy has been guided not by imperialistic tendencies, but by two primary things. One is the defense of the nation and its citizens, and the other is to promote our ideals of democracy and self-determination and personal freedom. If you look at our history as a nation, there is probably no nation that is more generous in its time and its treasure to other nations, whether it's from the Peace Corps or USAID, or a response when another nation is having a major disaster, whether it's the tsunami in Indonesia or the tsunami and the earthquake in Japan. No other nation expends so much time and effort to rebuild those nations that they had been at war with and to help them along. So for those that would like to paint a negative picture of us, and right now the war on terror, we're primarily focused on transnational Islamic extremism as the terrorist groups. Those who would like to create dissent say we are a biased nation of Islamophobes and we are hate mongers. But they're forgetting we risked our lives in the Balkans, that we went in to assist the nation of Kuwait, and that we have elected a president that shows proof positive that when it comes to ideals of the nation, we select the person we think is best for the job and is representing what we're looking for. If you spend your time seeking approval constantly from those that hate you and want to destroy you, you're going to have disastrous results. We are one of the most diverse nations on the earth, and we are unified by core principles of mutual respect of our differences. And the consequences of having our voice taken and leaving those efforts unchecked will continue to make our lives more and more difficult. So, on the foreign policy front, there's some major fundamental changes that I think that are occurring, and one is that our foreign policy has historically been defined by our interaction with other states. But now increasingly we're finding ourselves dealing with transnational non-state actors that seem to have greater and greater power and say over what's occurring. Going back to 9/11, we were very unprepared for that particular event for two reasons, or two of many reasons, but one was we were dealing with a transnational non-state actor. We knew what our security risks were, and we had balanced and assessed all the other nations that we deal with, but not a transnational actor. The other is that the attack was launched from within our borders. That was something else we were also not prepared for. We were set up for an attack from overseas. So what was exploited in the course of that was that our open door policy to the world had resulted not only in are bringing in individuals such as Sheikh Abdul Rahman, the blind sheikh, who was the spiritual guide for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. But we also brought in many foreign students, and we encouraged people to come on visas, and these are some of the same people that, or I should say, those people that wish to cause us harm were aware of our open door policy and therefore made use of it for their own ends. The other thing that blindsided us is that, particularly in the case of Saudi Arabia and Egypt, they are our allies in peace in the Middle East. And that sense of having an ally in the country also went to all of its citizens. So of those citizens that would come into the United States, particularly Saudis and Egyptians, were thought to be less of a threat than, say, perhaps those that were considered state sponsors of terrorism. So now we find ourselves dealing with non-state actors that are scattered around the world, and these transnational organizations also include Americans. So part of the legal issues are, how do you deal with a situation where you have an organization that may be tens of thousands of people that are trying to cause harm to your citizenry that you are defending, but it is amorphous and they're scattered around the world. Excuse me. The upheaval now that is the Arab Spring presents an interesting set of circumstances. We were accustomed to dealing with certain governments, to pushing them and nudging them, and to engaging them in the peace process. In fact, we have worked tirelessly for peace in the Middle East, in the Western Sahara. We've attempted to provide peace to Somalia, Korea, and that has been one of our primary missions as a nation. What concerns many in the field is that with such an upheaval that is an uprising of popular sentiment to be progressive, is how is progressive defined in those nations? And with the upspring of the desire for change, when you create a revolution, there's often then a power vacuum, and that power vacuum can be filled by those that are the most violent and ultimately impose on the remainder of the population more regressive policies. The last point I want to just briefly talk about, because it falls into a lot of the conflicts, and it includes the war on terror, and that is the role of narcotics and illegal drugs with terrorism financing. You have, for example, I will call the Taliban a group of thugs that is primarily funded by the heroin trade. It is creating a miserable life for many of the Afghanis who are being forced to plant the crop for the Taliban because they have no other choice. Of course, narcotics is leading to another nightmare south of the border here in Mexico. And I don't think that those of the younger generation and the students realize that what they are doing recreationally is creating such a nightmare for so many other people around the world. So it's not often talked about, but they are integrally related. Thank you.